Star Trek, Starfleet Academy, Chapter 1. 2 years ago, we again put out the call and challenged you to go where no man has gone before. I am Ax Roderot, and as Commandant here, I'm very proud to welcome you to Starfleet Academy Command School. Since Starfleet Academy was founded, the United Federation of Planets has sought the best and brightest from over 1,000 worlds. Boy, did we look fine. Since I was 3 years old, my mother dug the grit of earth out of my ears and scrubbed me pink. I never felt cleaner. Being a cadet at Starfleet Academy was breathtaking enough, but being accepted to the command school, I almost flipped over the whole idea. Until now. It only had been a letter of acceptance tacked to my headboard, but today... David! What? I shook myself and looked at Robin. He had a shocky glaze on his cheeks. Did I look like that? You're slowing down, he told me. Shouldn't you keep moving? I stepped up my pace in the long line of command cadets, but the splendor of this place admittedly socked me with a big awe and even bigger insecurity. The rafters were vaulting in snowy white, the 30-foot backdrop curtain a shimmering electric blue, and the rows upon rows of seats covered in gold plush, white, blue, gold. Starfleet. I thought I was going to go blind. On either side of the auditorium were 30-foot windows. To our right, we had a perfect view of the shimmering blue San Francisco Bay, which the curtains in here were meant to imitate. We could just see the Point Bonita light, standing sentinel as it had since the 1800s. On our left sprawled the stately complex of Starfleet Command, its courtyards demarcated by formal sculpted boxwoods, and its hills jeweled with the Thomas Jefferson Rose Garden. Somebody had done this on purpose, positioning this particular building right between those two overwhelming vistas, stationing Starfleet Academy right where we could train and study and sweat within sight of Starfleet Command. And it was working. On the main platform, Commandant Roderot paused in his introduction to give the queue of cadets a chance to finish filing into place and sitting down. I was almost in front, about 3 rows from the platform, and blinked into the natural sunlight brought down from a prism ceiling. It was meant to save power, but also to imitate the deck prisms of old sailing ships, just so everyone would remember the roots of tradition here. This place was tradition to the gills, and as bright as the summer outside. I still had my C.S. Forrester, Horatio Hornblower books. Just as I sat down, another officer, smaller statured than Roderot and with slick black hair and an amused expression, climbed the short steps and joined the commandant on the platform. "Robin!" I gasped abruptly. "That's Captain Sulu! I didn't expect him to be here." "Kinda wish I was someplace else too," Robin murmured. I scolded him with a glance. "You've been saying that for days, but you're still here." He looked at me nervously, tried to change the subject. "Didn't you tell me Captain James Kirk was supposed to be the keynote speaker?" Robin's problems melted out of my mind at the thought of what he had just said. "James T. Kirk," I said. "I hope he's still coming. Maybe we can shake his hand." "Oh, no. I don't want to shake his hand. You're not going to make me, are you?" Typical. Robin never wanted to be noticed, so while I was standing next to him, I wasn't supposed to be noticed either. That was his version of security. Commandant Roderot was still waiting for the last few cadets to settle down, using the moments to make sure the citations and pins on his chest were all straight and polished. He even licked his finger and pressed back a hair that really wasn't out of place. And the gesture hit me like a punch. Was he insecure too? Could that be? Did senior officers get nervous? Then Roderot noticed Captain Sulu watching him quizzically, amused, and he quit fidgeting. "Don't you think we should get started, Commandant?" Captain Sulu asked. I could hear him from only 3 rows away. What a voice. "He isn't here yet," Roderot said. Sulu smiled. "Jim Kirk hasn't missed a command school opening for 8 years. He's gotten to where he enjoys them. He'll be here, so..." The deep voice faded as Sulu turned to look at something, and the sound went off in another direction. What was going on? I looked around, but the only thing that happened was Rotorot taking the lectern rather nervously. The rest of the cadets took their seats behind me and Robin. We looked like a spirited investment in the future, and I was proud and, all right, terrified to be part of it. I wasn't one of those kids for whom Starfleet had been a known constant while I was growing up. In fact, I hadn't given the service a single thought until high school. Then, one silly vacation with my eccentric uncle to a flight sim camp, and I was hooked. I started driving everything, anything that would go. Rolling, flying, skimming, floating. I wanted to go. Now, I was here. Guess I went. Sometimes life could be a whirlwind. The huge backdrop behind Rotorot startled me when it turned into a giant field of stars, a display screen of some kind of a big and gorgeous. Starfleet vessels of all types sailed by, vessels from the past, from the early days of exploration, clunky and strong ships that had taken the worst pounding space could offer. They reminded me in some ways of the Conestoga wagons used by pioneers. They seemed primitive and flimsy and easy to laugh down our noses at, but in fact, they were well armed and tough enough to rattle across great expanses and actually get where they were going. For just a few seconds, I got lost back in time with them. David? Robin's voice was distant, meaningless. Something wrong? I didn't answer. The starships were starting to appear. The early classes of fleet ships built by the Federation once they established Starfleet as their exploratory and defensive arm. Just like the old-time cavalry, they were the ones who went out and carved paths into the wilderness for settlers to come after. They'd established the forts, and people had gone out to connect the dots of the galaxy. Pretty soon I'd be going. The first of my family, pretty big family at that, to join Starfleet. Everyone else went to Clark University. Not like Robin. He had about 5 Starfleet servicemen in his family past. That's why he was here, in a place where he just didn't belong, facing a future that didn't fit him. Move aside, plebe. A massive protoplasm barked on the other side of Robin. I looked around in time to see this mass give Robin a subtle but firm shove with one sausage-like finger. A senior cadet towered over us, his shoulders cutting out lights from the ceiling prisms. Out, the senior growled down at Robin. Hey, I stood up. You got a problem? No problem, except your pal's sitting in my girl's seat. Girl? Is there a girl? Oh, yes. Not here, Frank. A female cadet appeared from behind the senior, pulled on his meanie arm. Why don't you just ask politely for us to move down? Because seniors don't ask, that's why, Junior. Frank, just sit down, the woman said. I took Robin's arm and we shuffled down one seat, causing the whole row of cadets to shift like a choppy wave. Nobody made any protests. Seemed some of them knew this guy. Good thing, because I was ready to protect Robin, and that Frank could easily have separated my head from any related tissue. Luckily, the senior let the girl move in and sit between him and Robin, but only after we moved down a seat so the pair of them had room to sit together. I'd heard about the strictness of senior cadets, for it was they, and not officers, who kept other cadets in line at command school. At the lectern, Commandant Rotorot straightened his pins and medals one more time, then started talking again. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my proud duty to present the new head of the command school. A loud whine blasted across the auditorium. At first I thought it was an alarm of some kind, maybe a mistake by the backstage guys running that beautiful screen full of ships passing by. But all at once I noticed that half the field of cadets were ducking their heads. Somebody shouted, "Down! Down!" I twisted around to see what was happening. It never occurred to me that the cadets might actually be ducking for a good reason, and a second whine broke across the auditorium so close my right ear ached. I cranked to my right. A cadet at the back of the auditorium stood with legs braced, and in his hand was a phaser rifle. A cadet, a Vulcan cadet. Had a Vulcan snapped? I know him, I said under the noise to Robin. That's Sturek. I had a couple of computer classes with him last. Somebody yelled, "Look out!" The Vulcan, Sturek, broke stance and rushed down the aisle toward the front platform. Beside me, Robin craned around, too confused to duck. Past his startled face, I saw an angry-looking human woman with brassy hair and an Andorian woman rush in from the wings, and they were firing some kind of projectile weapon at Commandant Rotorot. The senior named Frank bolted to his feet, but froze in place. His arms flared at his sides. He wanted to do something, but seemed completely lost about what to do. On the platform, Captain Sulu jumped in front of Rotorot and was driven down by the shots. I pushed to my feet and gripped the top of the seat in front of me, but that was as far as I got before a dark-skinned human about my age dropped from the ceiling, right out of the ceiling on some kind of cable. Well, what was this? David! Robin's voice was suddenly behind me. He hadn't moved. I had. I was standing on the back of the chair in front of me, launching off it more like, and the platform was only a couple more jumps away, and that dark-skinned guy was just hitting the platform behind Sulu and Rotorot. Behind me, the field of cadets was paralyzed with shock and horror as phasers sang across the auditorium, and I was pretty horrified to find myself rushing the stage. That dark-skinned guy was like a boxing sandbag when I hit him, but he went down just as his phaser rifle screamed against my ear. I must have hit him just right, because he outweighed me by a good 30 pounds and probably could have turned me into goop if I hadn't had the advantage of momentum. The two women were rushing the platform now. Against their forms, I noticed that the display screen had frozen with one ship halfway past. One of the women stopped and aimed at Rotorot, but Sulu forced himself up and got her by both ankles. The platform shuddered beneath me as they crashed to it. He brought her down. "Get off me!" the guy under me howled. I had his right arm pinned and the phaser rifle under my leg, but his left arm was free, and he pummeled me freely in the head and shoulder. The only blow I felt in the midst of shoving this guy down was a whack on the ear that sent my head reeling. Sturek loomed over me. I saw the flash of a phaser rifle and thought I was dead, but a new figure vaulted over me, skimming my right shoulder and caught a toe on my shoulder blade. The solid figure landed on one knee instead of both feet, but still managed to slam Sturek against the back wall. Twisting to look, I saw a stocky Starfleet officer's thick arms strain in his uniform tunic. His face was flushed, his amber eyes hard. I knew those eyes. How many portraits had I seen just in the past 6 weeks? James Kirk. Kirk smashed the Vulcan to the back of the stage, and the phaser rifle flew out and skittered to the deck inches from the hands of the guy I was holding down, distracting me for an instant. There were now 2 phaser rifles within a few inches of me. Could I get one? Should I? The guy under me wasn't so doubtful. He surged up in a sudden gush of power and threw me off and scrambled towards Sturek's phaser rifle. "No!" I shouted, and plunged for his legs just as he got the rifle and rolled over. I overshot and landed on his rib cage. He bawled in pain as my action nearly dislocated one of his shoulders, and he slammed into the stage deck, dragging me with him. There was another uniform on the stage now, and I knew this one right off too. Commander Chekhov. He was an instructor at the command school. He'd organized the cadets and given us our initial orientation not 2 hours ago. Now he was chasing down that Andorian woman and the human woman, who were both firing at him. But he managed to dodge them, and he had his own hand phaser with which he was keeping them from getting an aim on the run. They were headed out of the auditorium. Were they giving up? Or had Captain Sulu been the target of all this? The whine of those phasers cleared my head. I turned to the guy under me. Even though I'd never even kicked a cat in my whole life, I pulled back a fist, gritted my teeth, and got used to the idea of bashing a face in. Somebody grabbed my elbow. I couldn't throw the punch, and I made up my mind to throw it. Furious and caught in the heat of insult, I freed my other hand and swung it instead, but around at the person who was holding back my arm. Contact. Clipped him right in the mouth, caught a knuckle on his tooth. He twisted with the hip but didn't go down. In fact, he held me tighter. I stared until my eyes stung. I just clipped James Kirk in the jaw. Chapter 2. Why was Captain Kirk holding me back? Wasn't he on my side? The guy under me squirmed away, and for some reason I let him go. Sulu rose behind Kirk like a Tahitian god. "Belay that, cadet!" He was talking to me. I guess he thought I was going to throw another punch. I looked and saw that my fist was balled up again, ready to go. James Kirk shifted back and pulled me to my feet. "Good job. Stand down." He turned to the field of stunned cadets, most of whom were on their feet by now. In contrast to Commandant Rotorot's fastidious neatness, Kirk didn't care that his maroon uniform jacket was rumpled and bunched, his hair disheveled and his lip bleeding. He looked rough and didn't care. He yanked down the chest panel of his jacket, leaving the white lining showing, and let it hang that way. His voice carried to the back of the hall. "You've just seen an assassination by terrorists. How many attackers were there? How many got away? What were they wearing? Male or female, human or not? And why did only one cadet take action?" Rubbing his reddened jaw, he paused to let the question ring and turned to look at me. I felt cold all over. Beside me, Sturek helped the dark-skinned guy to his feet. Captain Kirk's questions rolled in my head. Could I answer any of them? The field of cadets glanced at each other, realizing they'd been had. Rotorot got up and checked his appearance. Commander Chekhov strode down the main aisle with the two women at his sides. They seemed damn pleased with themselves. Kirk nodded at Chekhov, then looked at me. "What's your name?" he asked. I licked my lip, but that didn't help. He drew a long breath, giving me one more second, then insisted, "The name, right now." "Cadet David Forrester, sir." Turning again to the audience, Kirk said, "Cadet Forrester survived. The rest of you are dead. So is your commandant and your command school's senior captain." He motioned to Sulu and Rotorot. "Not good things to have on your headstones." He moved away from me, forward on the stage, till all eyes were fixed on him. His voice carried through the hall. "Now you know that non-action has repercussions, just as action does. Sometimes a rash decision now is better than a thoughtful one 5 minutes from now. You're about to go into command training on the most technologically advanced simulators in the galaxy. Don't treat them like simulators. You never know what's real and what's not. What you learn at this academy, you'll be taking with you. Out there." He pointed upward at the vaulted ceiling, at the sky, at space beyond both. The field of cadets looked up, and so did I, as if we could actually see space through James Kirk's eyes. "And out there," his voice carried majestically, "everything's real. You answer the most profound call in history, commanding a starship crew." He paused as the backstage crew got the display screen moving again. The frozen ship passed on by and blended into an aerial view of San Francisco and Starfleet headquarters. Captain Kirk brought us down to Earth with a single step forward. "Starting today," he said, "you better be ready. There are damned few second chances, but plenty of first ones. They'll fall on your shoulders. You'll be the ones to open the galaxy. You'll be Starfleet." A moment of silence fell, chased soon by applause breaking out from the cadets like bells ringing. Another moment, and that applause blended with cheers. Commandant Rotorot stepped forward to James Kirk's side and motioned for the cadets to sit down. My legs felt like rubber. I wasn't going to faint, was I? Did they want me to go back to my seat or what? "Captain Sulu?" Commandant Rotorot gestured to the lectern. "Sit down, everyone," the assassinated captain said as he took the lectern, and he paused a moment as the field of cadets uneasily lowered into their seats again. "I am Captain Hikaru Sulu. I'll be with you the next 2 years before I take command of the USS Excelsior." Behind him on the huge display screen, a view of Earth was decorated brilliantly by the passing of the great new class of starship in standard orbit. Heavy and complex, the Excelsior slowly passed in tribute to her future captain. "It's my job," Sulu went on, "to create the Starfleet commanders of the future. I'll test you on your ability to manage your crew. Remember, you'll no longer be judged solely by your own conduct, but also by the conduct of those you command. And now, in case you don't already know, I'm privileged to present my friend, our distinguished guest, Captain James T. Kirk." I stood aside as James Kirk took Sulu's place, as if none of this had happened at all. How could he be so... My breath stuck in my throat when the big backdrop blended to a crisp, touchable vision of the new Enterprise, NCC 1701A. There was no mistaking that ship. Refit and sparkling, the fleet's flagship soared slowly past behind her famous captain. They were together, right here in this room, before my very eyes. What was I supposed to feel? "Welcome to command school," James Kirk said, as casually as if none of the staged attack had happened at all. It was as if we all had a joke to share. "You've just embarked on the most challenging course the Academy has to offer, and also the most rewarding. It's often said that command cadets are the best of the best, and it's also said that I commanded the best ship and the best crew. You want to know the truth? There's no such thing as the best. One ship may be brand new state-of-the-art technology, but it also might have countless bugs to work out. Another ship may be 100 years old and shake like a rattle, but the bugs are long gone, and that's why she's 100 years old." He paused, looked out over the field of command candidates, and his eyes twinkled with deep-laid tease. Behind him, the gorgeous new Enterprise passed by, and what came behind her choked up every throat and brought a tear to every eye. There, gigantic on the screen behind her captain, was Starship's greatest lady, the very first Enterprise, the oldest, the toughest, the one that had gone the farthest back when far was really far. She looked simple to us now, her muscular lines basic and her hull plates flashing like polished eggshells. Her red sensor disc was a target against the sky, or a pulsing heart against history. The blood fell right out of my face. I was as white as that ship. Now the ship faded away, replaced by a field of atmosphere blue, and upon that was imposed the brassy Delta shield symbol of Starfleet with a brass ring around it as tall as the whole screen. There the display paused and let Captain Kirk take over our complete attention. "The same goes for your crew," he said, his voice mellow and captivating. "They may be technical wizards, but if they can't work as a team, their skills are useless to you. When you meet your crew, you'll find 1,000 abilities and talents and flaws all crackling against each other. And that's where you come in. Those of you who succeed in building a team will be among the elite few who take us to the stars. Good luck, fair weather, and never forget that risk is your business." The hall full of cadets stared at him, overwhelmed. So did I. Was he telling us that all those best and brightest phrases were just wishful good publicity? That's what it sounded like. And he would know, wouldn't he? I had the feeling we'd gotten the greatest advice we could be given in 10 years of experience, and James Kirk had given it to us in 10 sentences. After a humbling pause, somebody way in back stood up and started applauding. Then, like rising tide, everybody did. Soon the hall was a sea of cheers again. I was still looking for my hands when Commandant Roderot came forward again. "Cadets, you're dismissed to meet with your advisors. Good luck." The rubber legs only shuddered when I tried to move. Cold sweat skittered beneath my uniform. That wasn't very best or brightest. A few steps from me, Captain Sulu moved up to Kirk's side with an evil grin. "Did you trip on purpose?" "I'll never tell," James Kirk said with a smirk. Commander Chekhov hopped up onto the stage. "I love to watch the cadets' faces when we do something like this. I wish we could do it every year." "They'd wise up if we did," Kirk droned, unimpressed with himself. He pointed to me then, and I thought I'd been shot. "Captain Sulu, I want you to put that kid in charge of those kids." Now he swung that pointing finger around to the Vulcan, the dark-skinned guy, the two women. Maybe I was a little slow, but I was getting the idea that these were cadets too, snagged for their first undercover mission. "Done," Sulu said bluntly. Kirk turned and stepped right up to me, drilling me with the most unflinching eyes I'd ever seen. "Forrester. Good name. Gives you a lot to live up to." I thought I had an idea what he was talking about. "Beg your pardon, sir?" The name Forrester has been synonymous with high seas adventure since the first Horatio Hornblower novel. C.S. Forrester taught me how to command a ship. Ah, C.S. Forrester, of course. Captain Horatio Hornblower. But that's not fair, having to live up to someone else's standards and reputation, Kirk anticipated. His sharp eyes carried an undefined glint. "You bet it isn't. Just wait till you have to live up to your own. And by the way, next time, try to hit the bad guys." Dismissed. He turned away from me, just like that, just turned as if all this were nothing. Robin tentatively climbed up onto the stage, keeping shy of the cluster of legendary men. and swerved to my side as if I could protect him from him. He took my arm. "David, that was great. You all right?" I choked up a voice to tell him I was fine, but something else squeaked out. "I hit James T. Kirk." Four hours earlier, my stomach was still quivering. 4 hours later, my stomach was still quivering, and an echo looped in my head. "I hit James Kirk. I hit James Kirk. Cadet, this way." The door panel slid open in front of me, and Commander Chekhov gestured me through the entrance onto a gunmetal gray carpet. The first thing I noticed was the sanctuarial quiet of the setting. Around me was a representation of the pulse of the settled galaxy, the bridge of a starship. The breath left my body as if I'd been punched by a brawny senior. The simulator bridge, a model of the Federation's brilliant center of expansion, the brain of Starfleet. As I looked around at the buffed braces and efficient arrangement of control panels, Captain Kirk's words flowed back into my head. "And out there, everything's real." Commander Chekhov led me down to the center deck, where the command chair stood in calm repose, facing the wide main screen. I touched the chair's black leather, and his eyes said, "Sit down." But I couldn't. I just couldn't. There were already other people here, 4 or 5. Chekhov nodded at the upper deck, where Sturek, formerly the Vulcan terrorist, stood enraptured by the science station, very focused. "That is Cadet Sturek, your science officer," he said, quietly pointing. "Yes, sir," I told him. "It threw me when he came in, shooting during the ceremony. I've never even seen him swat a fly before." The commander didn't seem impressed by the fact that I was impressed. His thick Russian accent added a certain finality to his cryptic promise. "I hope you like each other, because you'll be together for a long time. Over there is Jeffrey Corran." He pointed at the black cadet, the same guy I'd smushed into the stage deck. Now he was standing on a stool with his head in the bridge rafters, doing something to the lighting. "Your navigator?" Chekhov finished. "He comes from a wealthy family on Alpha Centauri." "Alpha Centauri? But he looks human." "He is. The Federation has had a colony there for 32 years, the commander explained. "Didn't you know that?" "No, sir, I guess I didn't." "He has trouble taking Starfleet seriously," Chekhov eyed Corran in a critical way. "He was up for command candidacy, but he didn't like the responsibility. He's here because he can shave days off a warp journey with navigation tricks. But there are risks to that kind of success. As team leader, you'll have to judge those risks." My stomach twisted. "Jana Acton, your helm officer?" Chekhov continued, nodding at the young human woman with the brassy blonde hair tightly bound on top of her head, the same one who had led the way in from the auditorium wings. "She comes from Rigel 12 mining colony in the Levantine Expanse. A rough place to grow up. Even the weather is against you. She has a touch for subwarp piloting, but had some trouble with the technicals. That also will be where you come in." Was he enjoying doing that to me? Chekhov turned to the command station, where Robin already had panels off and circuits exposed. "Your engineer, Robin Brady, you also know." "Yes, sir, we're roommates." "Not anymore. Now, as leader, you'll have your own cabin. Privilege of command. How Brady learned to rip and patch warp drive out on the Rio Grande, I've no idea. We chose him for his ability, but also because you know him, and we feel it's good to have someone you know on your team." He leaned one elbow on the command chair. I couldn't imagine doing that, and nodded at the Andorian woman. Her blue skin and ice-white hair caught the cast of the ceiling lights. She seemed almost to be made of dust, standing there at communications, playing the board testily, avoiding the others with aloof superiority. "Your communications officer is Vanda Migeia," Chekhov said. "Daughter of a prominent Andorian diplomat. That means upper class on Endor, in case you don't know that either." He was doing it on purpose. "I've never heard of an Andorian taking on a challenge like Starfleet," I said. "Hope she can handle it." "If not," Chekhov said, "it will be your duty to fire her." Shifting nervously from one foot to the other, I lowered my voice. I hope to get a command someday, sir. I sure didn't think it'd be on the first day. Well, it is. His bluntness took me by surprise. I'd hoped for a comforting word of wisdom. Guess I wasn't going to get one. You're scheduled to fly your first simulator mission in about 15 minutes, Chekhov told me. Make your first log entry, introduce yourself to your crew, and then will come your trial by fire. I hope you're ready for it. He pushed off the command chair as if it were just an old couch and headed for the entrance with a swagger in his step that left me tense. I touched the command chair's comm panel. Cadet's log, first entry. Cadet David Forrester, logging on.